point after the arrest, creating an opportunity for the media to take photographs and video of the event. In Europe, this is not strictly prohibited, but at least in theory, we have provisions in the criminal code prohibiting not the press to take some pictures, but law enforcement authority to put the suspect under that circumstances. A few samples before finishing. This one is probably the first perp walking in history. The man here on the left side is Edgar J. Hoover, the first Director General of the FBI. And this one is Alvin Karpis. He was a famous gangster who was caught in the Depression era. The photo was taken in May 1936 after a manhunt, a nationwide manhunt by the FBI. And probably this was the first time in which authorities decided to put consciously that man in a situation in which the press could take photographs of him when he was arrested. By the way, Alvin Karpis served then 33 years of imprisonment in Alcatraz and came to die in the 70s of the past century in Torremolinos, a location very close to Malaga City. The second one, sure, you also know what I'm speaking about. This is the detention of Lee Harvey Oswald, accused to the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The photograph was taken the day after the detention and seconds before he was shot by Jack Ruby. This is a very famous one as well. When Saddam Hussein was detained, he was put at this situation of the perp walk to leave the press to have this, to catch this picture of the detention. A very controversial one, most recent one, that man is Dominique Strauss-Kahn. On that moment, he was a possible candidate to the presidency of France, and he was detained, charged with sexual assault in 2011 in New York City. It was a real scandal in France because this photograph in France could have been prohibited. You cannot expose a man detained and handcuffed to the public eye. And finally, this is Russell Crowe, the actor, the gladiator. He was detained and in June 25 by New York police and charged with, after he threw a telephone to an employee of the hotel who couldn't make the telephone lines to work. And he was accused to the possession of a criminal weapon, the criminal weapon being the telephone. And obviously, the police took the situation to have the celebrity detained to put him under the public eye. Prospective to the problem. I think that solutions will remain to be, in that way, cultural, but we must take into account that we are talking about a borderless problem, because it's completely useless if you regulate something and in the other part of the world the situation is different. So, for example, the photographs, the picture of Russell Crowe, of the Dominique Strauss-Kahn, it could be prohibited in France, in Europe, but it was taken in the United States, and obviously accessible by the internet without problem. Second, the new role of the social media. We have a presentation now on the topic. And I think that it has also it has brought a revolution with it. because we are not talking now about the press. We are talking now that everybody has a smartphone in his hands, so the situation has changed dramatically. And obviously questions of democracy and transparency that cannot be put aside when imagining the way in which we could find a solution to this. Probably it will be a question of balance, a question of balance. That's all. Salamat. Muchas gracias por su atención. Thank you very much.
And speaking of social media, our next presenter will be talking about the social media. He is the chairperson of the Intellectual Property Department here in the Ateneo Law School, a lecturer in various universities and government agencies and international organizations, of course, on IP. He received his Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo Law School, obtained a Master of Intellectual Property degree at the Frank Pierce Law Center in New Hampshire, and attended a postgraduate scholarship program on intellectual property at the Munich Intellectual Property Law Center in Munich, Germany, and at the Queen Mary Intellectual Property Research Institute in London. He's the past president of the Licensing Executive Society of the Philippines. And, you know, his credentials are probably longer than his paper to be presented today. Suffice to say, he is our intellectual property resident expert to talk about the precautions of agreeing to social media's terms and conditions. Let us welcome Professor Ferdinand F. Negre.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow. Let's do that one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Buenas tardes. My friends call me Ferdinando, so you can call me Ferdinando. I am no Ferdinando Magallanes, though, so far from it. Okay, let me segue with what Angel mentioned, the necessity to strike the balance, but the balance is always moving. In technology, we have this face recognition technology, which is becoming popular in catching criminals. But statistics say 60% is a mistake. Misidentification. So where do we draw the balance between security and human rights? Especially when it comes to concerts, 9 out of 10 mistaken identity. Why? In concerts, go to an Elvis Presley concert. Okay, they know Elvis Presley. Everybody looks like an Elvis Presley. So 90% mistake. Let's talk more about technology in this presentation. A bit of a precaution, I'm going to raise questions. I'm not going to answer questions. Another one, I understand from the program I have 20 minutes, so I'll try to finish early. Is that good? Thank you. Okay. Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. Let me just try this, yes. Okay, how many of you here read the terms and conditions when you click I agree? Be honest. We have two out of 100, 2%. Okay, that's good because 9 out of 10 in the survey, they just click I agree. Yeah? Are you one of those? If you belong to the younger generation like me, almost 97, almost 100%. They just click, I agree. And yet, 80% know that the information that they share will be shared by the companies. 80%, and will be used by the companies. Why do we do that? Well, I just want to use Facebook. Who cares about the terms and conditions, right? So what do you really sign up for? You own the contents that you upload, but you do not know that the agreement usually have broad licenses in favor of the network. Number two, what kind of data? They constantly update the data. How? It's called data mining. Big data. We'll talk a little bit about big data in a while. Via GPS, they know where you are. So if you're going to that mall across the street, and then a pop-up in your cell phone saying, Din Tai Fung, because he knows that you're going to the mall. IP addresses, internet activity, your shopping behavior. They mine all those through the big data and data mining. Scared? No, because we want to be on social media, right? How many of you have Facebook account? Wow. Come on, don't be ashamed. LinkedIn, on LinkedIn. Mas marami, professional networking, right? So how long will your data be stored? This is interesting. Forever? Yes. You deactivate, oh, I'm no longer on Facebook. But the data you have uploaded is there. You cannot access your data, but others can. Scared? We should. We should be scared. Diba? Question, is the Data Privacy Act of the Philippines apply to social media? What about Data Privacy Act? Well, the right to be forgotten. Diba? Have you heard of that? The right to be forgotten. There's such a thing under our DPA. But can you raise the DPA for this on social media? Can you? Actually, the Data Privacy Commission issued an opinion on this question, and they said, yes, networking sites included. And the reason, because it is not expressly prohibited, or it's not expressly excluded. Do you agree? And remember that DPA has criminal sanctions. So, should we? I will revisit that in a while when we go to Vivares, the case of Vivares. Last point, your post can end up anywhere, and other users can use that. And there's no control. There's no control. What about the terms and conditions? When you go to Instagram, that long terms and conditions. Will you read those terms and conditions fine print? Will you? Well, if you're on WhatsApp, it's short. Perhaps you will. But who uses WhatsApp versus Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook? Popularity. Everyone wants to be popular. That's why I don't know why we have the right to be forgotten. Oxymoron. Do you know what this is? Alexa. Thank you. Someone's listening out there. What's Alexa? Well, similar to your Siri, Bixby. This is what Alexa can do. Boil water, turn on the lights, order a pizza. Yes. Diba? Very convenient. Alexa, please call my wife. Oops. More than that, is that what you signed up for? More than that, Alexa, in a very recent, I was reading up, actually yesterday only, someone in the US was complaining because she found out that her Alexa, she visited the history, her Alexa was recording her conversation with her husband and uploaded on the cloud. Yikes. Did she sign up for that? Terms and conditions. So here's the big question. Freedom of contract versus or contract of adhesion. What do you think? Can you raise contract of adhesion as a way to contest the terms and conditions you did not read? In the Philippines, the latest decision on contract of adhesion is in 2013, wherein the Supreme Court and the previous decisions said that contracts of adhesion are not invalid per se, because you have the option not to adhere. So, we're bound by those terms and conditions. In the US, well, those decisions, there are no decisions in the Philippines relating specifically on social media. I agree, click. None of those. In the US, generally, the issue is, do you have that opportunity to read? It's an opportunity to read thing. If you did, then if you click agreed, I agree, then you're bound. They distinguished between browse wrap and click wrap. Browse wrap is you click a link so that you go to the terms and conditions. Generally, the US courts would say, it's not readily available, the terms and conditions. While a click wrap, the pop-up, the terms and conditions pop up on another window and then you click agree. So it's there in your face. And in those situations, click wrap contracts are valid. So do we need a special law? Does Congress have to issue a law specifically on these kinds of contracts, social media contracts? Why? To protect the public, like 98% of these people, right? Because only 2 read the terms and conditions. Especially the young. So, let me leave that issue hanging. Privacy on social media, we have a case, Vivares versus St. Teresa's College of Cebu. Some of you may be well aware of this case, especially in the academe. Well, what happened in this case? A group of young students, they uploaded their photos, party, and then they uploaded their photos only with their underwear. So what happened? Some of the friends, in high school, some of the friends told the teacher. The teacher downloaded the photos and showed the photos to the disciplinary officer. They found out that there is a violation of the school policy. What happened? The Supreme Court said there was no reasonable expectation of privacy in this case because the students failed to prove the use of the privacy settings. So the reasonable expectation of privacy. And let me read to you another portion of that decision. OSN, online social network users, should be aware of the risk that they expose themselves to whatever they engage in cyberspace activities. Accordingly, they should be cautious enough to control their privacy and to exercise sound discretion regarding how much information about themselves they are willing to give up. So it's like a buyer's beware caveat emptor thing. Now, this is a 2014 case. The Data Privacy Act is 2012 issuance. So it seems, if you look at this case, it seems that the opinion of the Data Privacy Commission is not in consonance with this, wherein the Data Privacy Commission said that DPA, or the Data Privacy Act, applies to social media. That's my take. So just a bit on the big data. What's big data? We talk of volume, velocity. Big data is the data in the internet. Variety, veracity. Zettabytes. Have you heard of zettabytes? What the heck is zettabytes? So zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. Can you imagine? I cannot. 2.5 quintillion bytes a day created a day. Wow. That's big data. Really big data. Velocity. I don't want to speak about velocity because in the Philippines we don't have that. Including Ateneo Law School. That's a joke, sorry. The two deans are here, sorry. Variety, everything. At home. How do I manage this thing? Go to YouTube and voila. Step by step, they show you. It will show you how to do things. Of course, Facebook for the young. Veracity, that's another problem. Uncertainty of data. That's big data on the net. What does that do? What does it, big data, what is big data? It provides for data analytics. Another issue, and that's why I mentioned this to my friend, Professor Piping. Monkeys in Spain are not pets, right? Okay, what happened in this case, in the US? Slater, he is professional photographer. So he set up this stage meaning natural stage in Indonesia, wherein Naruto, the monkey, a macaque monkey, took selfies. Everybody, can I take a selfie of this? Okay. So he took selfies of himself. And one of the photos actually is this one. And PETA, people for the ethical treatment of animals, jumped in, claiming rights on behalf of the monkey. Copyright, that is. Oh, by the way, if there are students here or faculty, this may come out in the bar exams. Huh? Can a monkey own a copyright in the Philippines? Answer is no, because an author must be a human being, okay? That will come out in the bar. Naruto, the Court of Appeals of, this is the 11th Circuit, I guess, cannot sue, no locus standi, cannot sue. Because in this case, the PETA failed to show that, 5 minutes, yes. PETA failed to show that Naruto is next friend. They're pushing their interest, not Naruto's interest. Segue back to the Philippines, personality to sue, resident marine mammals versus Reyes. What happened here? Philippine government entered into an oil exploration, Tanyon Strait, and plaintiffs claiming on behalf of marine mammals, resident marine mammals in Tanyon Strait, to have locus standi, the right to sue. The Supreme Court in this case allowed the case to continue only because the stewards themselves, not the marine mammals, have interest. They are real party in interest. So it seems that in this case, without expressly saying, the Supreme Court said the mammals themselves don't have standing to sue. They're not considered The stewards cannot represent the mammals in that case. So Naruto versus marine mammals, copyright is a private right. Same in the Philippines. U.S. federal court doesn't give animals the right to file copyright infringement suits. In Philippines, they don't have the right to own copyright in the first place. Our jurisdiction, locus standi, given a liberalized approach. Now, those are animals. How about automata? Can they be sued? There has to be a distinction between legal subject and legal object. I think Professor Balane mentioned this, juridical personality this morning. So, legal objects, economic value, but they don't have legal personality. How about robots? Do they have legal personality? You can sue legal subjects, but not legal objects. Are robots legal objects? That's the question. Technology can blur this distinction. Why? See? Self-driving cars, they can make decisions, can they? Yes? Are they rational persons or objects, rational objects? In the US, in Europe, I think this is Europe, yes, a movement to create a limited electronic personality. Should we follow? Kind of insurance, RFID, think RFID, and liable for damages. Presently, how do we do that? Are we going to sue the maker of the robot? Or the employer, akin to respondeat superior in torts law? Or the owner of the robot? Oh, by the way, Justice Ascuna was telling me this morning, 2 minutes, I'm good, thank you. Justice Ascuna was telling me this morning that in the US, there's a big debate on whether you have to ask permission to the robot if one is to have sexual intercourse with the robot. Wow. And it's a big issue. So are you going to sue the owner, the employer, or the maker? Or the robot? Are you going to sue the robot? And there is here a difference between AI, artificial intelligence, they are programmed to do that, and machine learning, where the robot can make decisions. They can learn iterative processes, algorithm. Wow. So that actually ends my presentation. I'm not going to discuss drones because I understand this is another topic tomorrow. But just to mention that there's a Senate bill more on security, not on privacy or the rights of drones or drone owners. Closing remarks. Let me quote from a case, 1942 case, Ang versus Chodoro. We have to apply this law as it has grown and not as it was born. Should we do that here for technology? Law is always playing catch-up, especially in fast-paced development in science and technology. Thank you. No questions, right? Thank you.
Keep your questions on hold, and we will have the open forum later. Meanwhile, we'll have a very quick coffee break. 5 minutes, and we hope to see you again here in the hall. Straight. it there? Yes, yes, no problem. All right, no problem. No problem. Let's sit. I can give you the.
this thing. Sound check. This check testing.
We will start in 1 minute. Okay, maybe we're ready to continue the second session of our conference. We're now in session 2, continuing that session on civil rights and freedom. Okay, so our next presenter is also a product of the Ateneo. She earned her Master of Science in Journalism degree from the School of Journalism of Columbia University in New York. And she is presently the acting managing editor and also the editor of the investigative desk and the central desk of Rappler Inc. She previously was a lecturer at the Ateneo where she taught media ethics in journalism and news writing, investigative journalism, issues in journalism, and so on and so forth. Again, a long list of credentials, but none of which is fake news. Let us welcome to make a presentation on social media and threats to democracy, the Philippine case. Let's welcome Professor Chai Hotelenya.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I am not a lawyer. I am a journalist, and it feels strange to be in a room of lawyers. Journalists are really trained to tell stories and to report. So maybe this will be a bit of a change in your afternoon for my presentation. I will be sharing with you the Philippine experience in so far as social media is concerned. I will be talking about the experience that different media has experienced in the past 2 or 3 years. If you will look at the statistics, we have a population of 105 million Filipinos. Of that 105 million, about 67 are connected to the internet, whether that's at home, in the office, or through internet cafes. There is connection to the internet. Of the 67 million, 57% are on Facebook. So Facebook is really the platform, the social media platform of choice for Filipinos. The country ranks number 6 worldwide in terms of Facebook users. So we're really a very, very heavy Facebook user. And if you were to compare that to last year, the growth of Facebook users in the Philippines has grown by 12%. Now, look at the demographics. I'm afraid you can't see very clearly, but it's a very, very young population of Filipinos that are on Facebook. The age bracket, 13 to 34 years old, make up 39%, almost 40% of Facebook users. And then you have the other social network platforms that are also popular to Filipinos. 56%, very close to Facebook, use YouTube. 36% on Instagram, 31% on Google+, 30% on Twitter, and both 19% for LinkedIn and Pinterest. Of course, as was mentioned earlier, those who are on LinkedIn are usually the elders and the professionals. They say that the younger ones are moving out of Facebook because their parents are crowding them in Facebook, so they're now transferred to Instagram and other sites. Now, let's zoom in on Facebook. If you look at the Facebook statistics, just in the Philippines, 69 million. Remember a while ago, 67 million are connected to the internet, but then a lot of people have multiple accounts on Facebook. That's why you have a bigger number, 69 million, who are on Facebook, and this is as of April 2018. Monthly active, those are all monthly active users. And then 93% use mobile phones to access Facebook and other social media accounts. So mobile is really, really critical in the country. And this is also the reason why a lot of people who use mobile use free data. And this is also why they do not go beyond reading the headlines. Because if they click further, then they get transported and then they have to pay. And they don't want to do that. So whatever they see in the headlines, they go with it. And that's where some of the problems come from. And this is also interesting. Look at social media. Worldwide, the Philippines is #1. We spend close to 4 hours a day on social media. And compare that to Japan. Japan, the Japanese spend only 48 minutes on social media. Whereas Spain, it's somewhere down there. And I think the Spaniards spend about an hour and a half. About an hour, 38 minutes a day on social media. But that's really, really low compared to the Filipinos' 4 hours. Now, they say that part of the reason that we spent 4 hours could be because of our slow connectivity. Very, very slow internet, right? So I checked the latest figures. On mobile, they said, just last April again, our download speed is at 14.01 Mbps. And this is way below the global average of 22.61. We're 14, okay? Upload speed is recorded at 5.99 Mbps compared to the global average of 9.1. But notwithstanding the connectivity issues, I think people still believe that social media has a lot of potential. It can be used, and we've seen it not just in the Philippines, but in the world. For example, in 2010, we heard about the Arab Spring. There was a lot of the democratization movements were said to have been brought about, or they would say that social media had a role to play in the democratization movements. And believing in the wisdom of the crowd and the more participatory journalism, Rappler was created in 2012. What is Rappler? It's really a social media news platform. We started out on Facebook, but eventually we migrated and we created our own site. And unlike the other media organizations, they're either connected to television or a newspaper. In our case, we're purely 100% online. So social media and the internet is really our world and our playground. We wanted to explore also the potentials of social media when it came to crowdsourcing reports of violence and vote buying. And we did this in the 2013 elections. So our coverage really tried to fuse the internet and broadcast media. And because this country is frequented by typhoons and man-made and natural disasters, we thought that maybe we should try to use social media also and technology to harness those potential and try to contribute to change. So what we did was we partnered with Ateneo de Manila's eAgos system. This one essentially aimed to improve disaster response and management. So there would be volunteers who would be working with, so our own volunteers who would be working with different government institutions who are involved in disaster response and management. Because one problem that we've seen is that it's very uncoordinated. So someone would need help, let's say in a flood-prone area, and because of communication problems, connectivity issues, the response would be very, very slow. Or there would be one government agency that would respond, and then another one would be responsible. What we see is a duplication of efforts. It's not very, very efficient. But if we had one map that would show areas that are flooded and get reports from the field and say, I need help, and the volunteers are able to map that and then work with government agencies, then and it's also visually mapped, then people see that, okay, this cry for help has been addressed. And we've been able to do that. This joint effort has resulted in the saving of at least, well, there were women who were pregnant and they needed help, and response was on the way. So essentially, what technology and social media have enabled us to do is to try to save lives and cushion the impact of disasters. Now, after technology, social media, and disasters, we saw something interesting in the 2016 presidential elections. We saw the first social media president. Why do we say that? Because Rodrigo Duterte's team was probably the campaign team that really took to social media and used social media very, very actively for his campaign. Why did they do that? Because they didn't have the money. If you run for president in this country, you need from 1 billion to 3 billion pesos. That's roughly about 19 billion US dollars. But not everyone can afford that. It's really, really expensive. So very, very creative on their part, they said, okay, let's use social media. Let's not use television. Let's not use the newspapers. Let's invest in social media. And all they had was 10 million pesos. So what they did was they organized nationwide. They identified they had 400 to 500 volunteers nationwide, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, and even overseas Filipinos who were, and those are big groups. And each one had a network, and they belonged to different groups. And some of the groups had members as many as 800,000. So you can imagine if you had information to share or a message to share, and you just shared it within those 400 to 500 volunteers, and that spread out to the entire network, you reach millions and millions of people on social media. And that's very, very efficient. You cut across borders, you don't limit yourself to the Philippines, but you go worldwide, and you're able to connect to OFWs, or overseas Filipino workers. They also tapped influencers. These are people on social media, whether that's Twitter or Facebook, who have a very, very big number of followers. So it was brilliant, actually, because if you don't have to reach out to everyone on Twitter. You just have to identify who are the key influencers, and then bring them into your campaign, and then use them, essentially. So what they were able to do was, tapping the bloggers and the influencers, they were able to make certain messages trend using hashtags. And apparently it also worked, because first of all, Mr. Duterte was really a very extraordinary candidate. He was very, very genuine. People liked him. He was a mayor. He had charisma. And on top of that, yeah, as I said, they use social media. So he won with he won getting 16 million votes, and that constituted about 40% of all Filipinos who voted. And then his campaign team said, wait, the victory doesn't end here, doesn't end everything for us. Because after the victory, you have to govern. And you have to help him govern. Now, his social media guy said, let's effectively help him govern, and let us use our setup. Let us use social media. The team that we use for the campaign, let's use it even after the campaign. Not long after he won, something happened on social media. We noticed a shift in tone. There was a very, very high degree of partisanship. There was very, very low tolerance for dissent and criticism. And there was die-hard defense of Mr. Duterte. And the defense, it was like the mantra was, the directive was, defend and protect Duterte so that he can govern. And that's fine, because a president really needs all that support, especially for the first year. And he had campaign promises. He said, I am going to stop or minimize or suppress drugs, corruption, and crime. Those were the big messages and the big promises. When we looked at social media, we also noticed that there was a proliferation of fake accounts. How do we know that they're fake? There are certain patterns that we saw. Number one, they didn't use their real photos. Instead, they used celebrity photos. Korean celebrities. They looked pretty, they looked sexy. And then they used cover photos. The cover photos were usually beautiful sceneries or gardens. And then they had less than 50 friends. And they were also connected to each other. So we were able to identify certain nests of fake accounts. It was really ingenious. It was a combination of both fake accounts and real accounts, and they were interacting with each other. So they worked together to help spread, to make viral disinformation spread. And what was the dominant message? It was really a message of hate and anger. And how did we see this? There were bloggers with a sizable number of followers who appealed to different economic classes. We call them the triumvirate. This is Sas Sasot. She is a transgender who is based in the Netherlands. So she appeals to the intellectuals. And she's a very, very active blogger. And then this is Mocha Uson, a former dancer who has, by the way, 4 million followers. Not like you have only a few hundreds. She has 4 million, okay? And then you have a blogger who used to be anonymous. He went by the name Thinking Pinoy, and then later he revealed himself as RJ Nieto. Essentially, the three of them would curse, intimidate, and use rough language. And the last two, Mr. Nieto and Mocha Uson, would get rewarded with government posts. My colleague, Maria Ressa, has been at the receiving end of vicious attacks. Let me read to you some of the examples. And this is also on social media. Maria, you are a waste of sperm. Your mother should have swallowed you. Get a real job, you doggy, dirty, pussy cunt motherfucker. Okay, that's one. And then another one. Die, stupid bitch. If you don't like our president, leave our country, whore. Okay? And there was a time at the peak of the attacks, they would come at about 90 hate messages per hour. It was just unbelievable. And there were several other journalists who were also attacked. Let's watch briefly.
Ay, oo. Have you been called biased?
Yes.
Have you been called stupid?
Yes, plenty times. By idiots.
Have you been called disrespectful?
Yes.
Have you been accused of corruption?
Yes.
Have you been called ugly as a response to any story?
Yes.
Have you been called fake news?
Oh yeah, they always say I'm fake news. Anything that's critical is fake, right?
Have you been accused of being an imperialist spy?
Yes.
Have you been accused of being a communist operative?
Yes.
Have you been accused of working for the CIA?
Yes.
Have you been sexually harassed as a journalist?
Yes.
Has your family been threatened, harassed, or alluded to?
Yes, it has. Specifically my daughter. When she died, there were a lot of people who made fun of that.
Have you been threatened with rape?
Yes.
Yes.
No, not me, but my family.
Have you been threatened with violence?
Yes.
Have you been threatened with death?
Yes.
Have you been told how you're going to be killed?
Yes.
Has the violence been described to you?
Yeah, blow my head off or bury me alive.
What will stop you from reporting?
Nothing.
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 Death.
You have to kill me.
Okay. So that's the world of journalists in the past few years. Add to this the bane of fake news. If you look at social media, it's really become a wasteland. There's a lot of trash, even if it carried a lot of promise. So, for example, this picture is very common. It went around on Facebook. This was supposed to be a girl who was killed and raped, murdered, 9 years old. It turns out this picture was not a picture taken in the Philippines, but a picture taken in Brazil. And it was posted on social media. And the one who posted it was a member of the campaign team of Mr. Duterte, and later he was appointed to the cabinet. Interestingly, if you look, we were looking at the patterns, and this is what we saw: very, very uncanny similarity with Russian patterns of information warfare. Number one, dismiss the facts. Number two, distract with alternative narratives. Number three, deceive with outright lies. And number four, dismay by warning of harsh consequences. Parehong pareho. They're so similar. And these four things were actually pointed out by an expert on Russian political warfare and European populism. Her name is Alina Polyakova. Okay. So, we come to the last two slides. Why do I feel that democracy is under threat? I haven't even let you hear what we've been hearing on social media. The video by the journalists are just really a summary. But if you hear the raw messages on social media, you would really be intimidated and appalled and shocked that how could this platform be used and misused? So the effect of this is that critical media is silenced, state propaganda becomes very, very aggressive, and there is state-sponsored hate speech. Because as I showed you a while ago, the bloggers who engage in hate speech have been rewarded with government positions. And there is manipulation of information and truth, manipulation of rationality and deception, and there is just brazen disregard for the truth. And that hits at our core because we are journalists and we are about truth-telling. And we see this proliferation of fake messages and falsehood on social media. And it is just very disturbing for us. And what has been created is really an alternate world with alternate facts and alternate standards. What used to be wrong is now acceptable. What is appalling is tolerable. So the standards have just really changed. So the questions that I ask, how do you regulate? Do you even try to regulate or legislate to make social media better? Can you legislate or regulate for greater accountability or transparency? How do we do that? Number two, lawyers, what can you do? What are the inputs that you can share so that we don't move towards censorship and curtailment of freedoms, because we don't want that either. We want self-regulation, but if self-regulation isn't working, what's the next best thing? And then how do we harness big data and technology to make the flagging of content more efficient? Because what Facebook has done now is that it has partnered with various media groups to identify and flag fake news. But it's so cumbersome. It's not really very efficient. Then what contribution can academia make to better understand online behavior? Why do people behave that way? Why do people click? Why do people share? Why do people share information even if they know that it's fake and it's false? How do we explain that kind of a behavior? And then, will the filing of cases be a deterrent? Will that really help if you file cases against people who slander you or who libel you, or will it just further clog court dockets? So I end with this. At a time when truth is really being challenged, we remind ourselves, during times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hofelenia. Hold your thoughts. We will pose our questions during the open forum. To cap the session on civil rights and freedom, we have our next presenter. She is attorney Lady Cañada, who received her Bachelor of Laws degree at the Cor Jesu College in Digo City, Davao del Sur, and she was admitted to the Philippine Bar last year. She is currently the legal officer at the Jose Maria College in Davao City and an associate at the Torreon and Partners. Attorney Cañada is also a TV anchor at the Sunshine Media Network International and a professor at Jose Maria College, both in the undergraduate studies and the College of Law, to make a presentation on a rights-based approach to gender and development, a policy mainstreaming. Attorney Lady Jade Cañada.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank this International Congress for inviting us and for giving us this opportunity to present our paper. Well, this is actually a research paper, a group work done by me and my two colleagues. Actually, I'm just a co-author of this research paper. So, as you can see in the photo in the slide, can you show the whole picture? So what can you say about that picture? That speaks about a group of women raising their hands. As you can see, they are addressing or clamoring for something, right? So that's an overview of my report for this afternoon. Next slide. Before I begin, I would like you to see this photo. This is actually a building beside Davao International Airport. So if you're from Manila, you have to ride 1 hour and 45 minutes to Davao. And right side of that airport, you can see a huge building. This is our campus, the Jose Maria College. So that's the facade of our school. And so we would like to thank in behalf of JMC for inviting us here in this International Congress. Thank you. So my research is entitled A Rights-Based Approach to Gender and Development, a Policy Mainstreaming. So here's a quote: "The most precious gift you can give a girl is the gift of your time and attention." And here's another one: "Change this girl's life and you begin to change the world." Meaning to say, if you want to change the world, then you have to change a girl's life. So what is the research background? I'm sorry, this is a PDF. So our studies premise on the agendas of the international organizations such as the World Economic Forum, the United Nations Development Fund for Women, and the CEDAW, or the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It speaks about that. This organization also has agenda about women empowerment, social, economic, and political equity, and broader access to fundamental human rights, improvements in nutrition, basic health. And as you can also see in the UN DFW, that women's involvement with mainstream activities, and also in the CEDAW. So these are the 17 goals given by the United Nations on sustainable development. And as you can see in the 5th goal therein, the United Nations also would like to have gender equality as part of their goals. And also, in part of the research background are the international organizations such as United Nations. So it is also the goal of United Nations to develop countries with gender inequality, and that in the Philippine setting, the government has exerted enormous efforts through the allocation of budget, which targets mostly the programs for GAD. Okay. So here in the Philippines, we already have a law that pertains to gender and development. And we have here gender mainstreaming evaluation framework. The development must be equally distributed between women and men. Consider the challenges of gender division of labor among men and women in order to formally address the existing biases that occur in gender equality. And it is the policy of God that there be strategic policies that were implemented internationally should be well effectively and efficiently implemented here in the Philippines, most especially in our local government units. So the conceptual framework is that, as you can see in this slide, so how do you mainstream this gender and development policies? That you have to have level of implementation, the level of knowledge, and the socio-economic demographic profile. So the statement of the problem in this research paper is that to what extent do the Barangay Council mainstream God provisions in barangay governance? Meaning to say, we have these gender and development provisions, but the question is, are they effectively implemented in the barangay level and in the local government units? So the area of our study, we chose Cagayan de Oro City because this city is a competitive metropolitan. This area is within northern Mindanao, and there are various issues concerning the welfare of women in this city. In fact, Cagayan de Oro City is among the first city to initiate and to have passed a local legislation that addresses women's concern. And according to the Nursing Research Journal of the Xavier University of the Ateneo de Cagayan, there are various issues concerning the welfare of women in that particular city. So we chose Cagayan de Oro City as the area where we conducted this particular study. So likewise, I said earlier, this is that city is also the benchmark for local legislation about women's general welfare. So what is the method of this study? So our method for this study is that we use the descriptive method. So we have RA 7192. RA 7192 speaks about Women in Development and Nation Building Act, which provides the integration of women as full and equal partners of men in development and nation building. So the method of this study is that we use focus group interviews. And as a result of this study, in this table, as you can see, this is the frequency distribution on the presence of cases of violence against women. So a large number of percentage pertains to physical cases, which is 63.33%, meaning to say that in those barangays that we have visited, most of the women are experiencing physical cases. 16.67% are experiencing rape cases, 13 for harassment cases, and other relevant violence against women cases, 23.33%. With regards to the distribution on problems encountered by the barangays in the implementation of GOD programs, they were saying that the budget allocation is insufficient. So we came up with 53.33% of those respondents saying that there is insufficient budget allocation by the government, for these provisions, the GOD provisions, to be fully implemented. And with regards to the distribution on actions, interventions to address violence against women, 13.33 says that there should be increase in the allocation of the GOD budget. And then there's a frequency of distribution of income in the barangays. So we came up that 43.33% is within below 2 million income classification amongst the respondents in this particular case, who are the barangay councilors in Cagayan de Oro City. And we have also the distribution of sex ratio in the barangay. It says that 66.7% denotes the number of males ratio, which is less than the number of females. So meaning to say there are more males than females. As a result, the question is that what is the extent of implementation of the barangay councils on the gender and development provisions? The prioritization of the legislative agenda through the local legislation it should promote gender equality, provided that local laws and guidelines enacted guarantee that needs of men, women, and other subgroups are considered and addressed. And then we have here the distribution on the presence of legislative agenda on gender and development. It says here that 13.33% of those barangays do not have legislative agenda with regards to gender and development. And that 93.33% of the barangays initiated for the establishment of women organizations. For example, they have Barangay Women's Development Council, they have Barangay Women's Development Association, Barangay Women's Network, Motherhood Association, etc. And we have frequency distribution on 5% allocation. So actually the gender and development, the government actually allocated 5% allocation. 86.67% of the barangays apportion budget on GAD. And finally, the distribution of the barangay council who passed resolution, it speaks here that 66.67% of the barangays, or 20 barangays, have already passed resolutions in relation to gender and development provisions. And what are those, how many of those who have approved resolutions? There are only 16.67% barangays in terms of approved GAD resolutions. So the conclusions that we have here in this study is that we say that in consideration of the foregoing data and the corresponding interpretation, the data explains that there is a low interest and weak responses of the barangay councils concerning gender and development. As such, the following point summarizes the conclusions and implications of this study. The socio-economic attributes of the barangays in Cagayan de Oro City in terms of income, classification, popular ratio of men to women, and distance from economic hub. The level of knowledge of the barangay officials on GAD provisions, the extent of implementation of the barangay councils on the GAD provisions, the extent of the socio-economic characteristics of the barangays affect the implementation of the GAD policy. The financial capacity of a barangay is crucial. Problems encountered in the implementation of GAD policy, meaning to say that there is an insufficient budget allocation and the presence of physical cases. And what are the concrete actions and interventions that the government must do? There should be massive awareness of what a gender and development policy is all about. They should conduct capacity building for the barangay implementing officials, and then they should strengthen the monitoring scheme, and the government should increase the allocation of GAD budget. And the barangays are challenged with gender planning and technical and political processes and procedures necessary to implement gender sensitivity program. Number 7, advance local commitment to GAD issues and concerns, meaning to say that we should develop new strategies that will prevent and respond more effectively to gender-based locally, and community-wide method that identifies, coordinates, integrates, and leverages current efforts and resources. So the recommendation of our group for this policy is that we have to improve governance in the implementation of the gender and development, more extensive advocacy on GAD for all stakeholders. So in this hall right now, I know that most of us here are women. We should be advocates of these GAD provisions. And then there should be intensive localization of the GAD at the barangay level. And we should institutionalize budgetary support for GAD by pushing for automatic appropriations, and the barangays of Cagayan de Oro City to adopt more effective revenue generation strategies. And that we must need to institutionalize monetary mechanisms at the LGU and barangay level. With this, I would like to end by reading this quote from President Obama. He said that we support societies that empower women because no country will reach its potential unless it draws on the talents of our wives and our mothers and our sisters and our daughters. You can measure how well a country does by how it treats its women. Once again, thank you so much and have a good day.
Okay, So time for our open forum. May I invite again our speakers from session 2 to have a seat in front, and kindly raise your hands if you're interested to pose a question. Just a few reminders. If you are asking a question, kindly state your name and designation or affiliation for documentation purposes. And per participant, limited to 1 question so that everybody gets a chance. So, si Attorney, okay, complete po ang ating speakers. Yes, the gentleman from the 4th row first, before Peping, sorry, I have to acknowledge him first, and then Peping, yeah. Kindly introduce yourself, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. I am the Dean of the Mindanao State University. I'm Attorney Alizidni M. Tocalan. My question is to Professor Ferdinand Negri, because you talk about, as we all know, that the GDPR has just took effect. And the current debate now is really on privacy, and we also talked about privacy a while ago. But how do you see expanding the regulatory framework on protecting privacy vis-a-vis competition law tools? Because it seems that the dynamic market seems to be, it's too much expanding, that the current privacy protection norm vis-a-vis abuse of dominant position by the dominant players may not be enough to protect privacy.
Good afternoon, Dean. Thank you for that question. I think we can ask that question in the module 3 of which will be in the, I think they've shortened it to 2 days. So can we save that question? Let's ask the commissioners, because, yeah, it's a difficult question. In fact, abuse of dominance and privacy, yes, they can be connected in the sense that when you have dominance, the power to suppress privacy is heightened. So again, I remember that last slide of Professor Angel, where do you strike the balance? The interest, the privacy interest of especially the consumers, if you were talking of the consumers in that scenario. With more reason, I think that the PCC, the Competition Commission, should look into the power that a company can exercise when it comes to when it affects the privacy rights of the consumers in this case. Did I address that question? At this stage, you know, both laws are babies, so to speak. And we can see the overlapping, the interplay here, but how to apply, to implement these laws vis-a-vis each other is, at this stage, I think, something difficult. Thank you for giving me that difficult question.
Okay, our next question. And for those who still want to ask questions, just smile at me or raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Oh.
I am Pepin from Malaga University. This question is for my friend, Ferdinand Negrin. First, thank you, because your daughter is going to be one of the 4 students from Ateneo who will receive 1 semester in Malaga next year. Thank you for your trust. We take care of your child. Okay. But this is an open question. You don't need to answer me. Don't tell me I make a difficult question. What I want to do is a tribute to a professor from Malaga. He's Professor Antonio Diegues. He's a professor of philosophy. And he wanted to come with us. At the last moment, he couldn't. So I want to say something he would say here about this matter. He has a book. The name of the book is Transhumanism. And he speaks about the following. It is foreseen that in year 2050, the first computer with a capacity greater than the human brain is going to be built, constructed. And that this reality that is going to happen in only 30 years opens us a number of different questions. First, if you want to hire an architect, what do you hire, the man or the computer? Are we going to have work, or we are going to go all to be retired in advance? That is the first. Second, if the computer can think, is more intelligent than the human brain that have self-conscience. Is that a robot with personality? That is, and second, I don't know if you know about the owner of Google, but in this book, Antonio Diegues speaks about, he is obsessed with immortality. And he says he's investing a lot of money in order to enlarge life, but enlarge life is not possible. Only by, maybe you can, by medical ways, to reach 150 years. Maybe, but no more. So this man thinks that, well, I first enrich my life 150 years, and then when we have these so big computers, it will a way to transfer my mind from my body to the computer. So I make a copy of my mind in a computer. So what is that? Is that an intelligent being with personality? So all these questions is open questions that we can think about when the fact that a computer more intelligent than our own brain is going to become. Thank you very much for your speak, Ferdinand.
Thank you, my friend Peping. Just a thought on that. We're now in the what they call the fourth industrial revolution. And there's no saying where it can stop. 10 years ago or more, we have Deep Blue. No one can beat Deep Blue, the super chess genius. But those are only algorithms. They're not machine thinking or machine learning that we have now. So really, we don't know how innovation and technology will bring tomorrow, perhaps, because a lot of these geniuses are working on improving technology. And if computer is better than human beings, when human beings created the computers, I don't know, it's possible, but as I said, it's scary.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Introduction, please, and affiliation.
I'm Bang Dizon from the Ateneo. I have a question for Attorney Negre. Sorry, it's a hot topic. So, you posed a question on how long can social media outfits store information. But do you think that since the intent of the GDPR and actually our local data privacy law is to have purpose limitation in terms of processing personal data, can you actually say that this concept of purpose limitation limits that period of how long can this social media outfit store the data?
Technically, yes. If we say that the DPA or the GDPR apply to social media, yes, technically. But how can that be done? It cannot be, because once an information is uploaded, there's no saying where it goes. So you cut that part, but a minute, it's all over the net. So technically, by regulation, yes, you can do that. But I don't think it can be done because, let's say, going back to my knowledge on intellectual property, if if a pirated product is posted online, you can stop that particular website, that particular source, but once it's being broadcast, it's there. And anyone can capture it, and upload it again and again and again. So on the technical side, it's almost impossible. Remember that we are in a global, it's already global. And how can I have jurisdiction if I want to stop the spread of a particular information? How can I stop that worldwide? Do I go to each court? How can I have jurisdiction over that entity doing the dissemination? It's almost impossible. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? If you're a bit shy, okay. Yes, sir.
So, good afternoon. My question would be posed to Professor Chai Hofilenya, and I am Jose Rafael Bartolome from the UE College of Law. So, let me start first by relating to you that I've also been a victim of social harassment in social media because I'll admit that I am a great dissenter of our president because I really don't agree with a lot of that is happening. So I've been socially harassed so many times for posting information against the president, especially when I point out fake news where people would dismiss my facts, they would give their alternative facts, and eventually they would tell me, Duterte pa rin, you're going to die. So, given the data that you have presented, ma'am, I believe that the status of our social media in the Philippines is rather grim. Therefore, is it safe to say that that we Filipinos are still immature when it comes to handling social media, given that we don't know how to post properly, how to properly use social media without respecting the rights of others or with respecting our rights? And a follow-up to that question, as lawyers and legislators, how do you think should we address the grim state of social media in the Philippines? Do you think that we should ban Facebook outright in the Philippines?
Very interesting questions. First of all, I think are Filipinos immature? I think we have a lot of media literacy to do. Because as we've seen, no? People go on social media, people go on Facebook as young as 13. And they don't know, and then they say that, it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and that's your platform. You can say whatever you want. You can curse to death whoever you want. But so the awareness of the limits of social media, self-restraint is not there. I think the initial salvo, the assault on social media shocked everyone. And we weren't prepared for it. We weren't prepared for the foul language and the curses, no? And the immediate effect was silence. You withdraw, you move out of social media. But you have to reclaim that space because it's supposed to be, originally the concept was, it's a platform for expression. So it has to be preserved as that. So even if you've been attacked, you'll know it. You'll know if you're dealing with trolls or if they are bots. If they're bots, give up. No need. There's no rationality there. But if you're dealing with a rational person who seems to be listening or willing to listen to what you're saying, then I'd say go ahead and engage. It might be worth it. For lawyers, what should lawyers do? I don't know. God, I don't know. Because you can't, it's hard to regulate Facebook. It's hard to control what people say because it's freedom of expression. So I don't have the answer. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer for what should lawyers do. Did I answer everything?
Other questions, or those who probably may have the answer to her question? Yes. Okay.
I have one question for Professor Hofileña, but please allow me to make some statements to put context to my question and also to address our Spanish friends. It's about your presentation. Democracy simply means rule of majority. 70 to 80% of the Filipinos approve of the way the current administration runs the government. Business in the Philippines is flourishing, and the country is touted as highly competitive investment destination. Streets in Metro Manila and elsewhere in the country are much safer now than before. Crime rates are down. The government will soon have peace talks with the longest-running insurgents in the world. Media is still free to criticize the government, including the Supreme Court, involving constitutional issues pending before it, practically attacking judicial independence. Now my question, ma'am, is, who is to judge on whether or not Philippine democracy is under threat?
Citizens are the judge. Let me. You are assuming you're going by survey results. Survey results have their limitations. You have to look at methodology. You have to look at how representative it is. Because if you will talk to those who are taking surveys, they will tell you increasingly more and more people are refusing to answer survey questions because they are afraid. So I don't know how representative or how truthful those survey results are. Now, you say that the economy is looking good, it's great in the Philippines, but I'd like you to go to the urban poor, the poor areas, and look at the communities. Now, sure, they say that we're safer, there are lesser drug addicts around, but at what cost? You also have to factor in human rights. Look at the decline. Look at our standing in Europe. You talk about human rights. The Philippines is not up there. Extrajudicial killings. How can that be acceptable? We're a Catholic country, yes, but why are we saying that these extrajudicial killings are acceptable? Diba? And then you say that media is free. Look at our case. There have been 3 cases filed against us in rapid succession since January. Number 1, Securities and Exchange Commission over PDRs, ownership, anti-dummy law, violation of the Constitution. That doesn't work. Number 2, especially if you look at PDRs and you look at precedents. Number 2, cyber libel law for a story that was published before the cyber libel law was passed. There is no retroactive application of the cyber libel law, is it? Is there? And number 3, what was the 3rd case? Tax evasion. And again, that's being contested. So if you look at, and then what happened to the Inquirer? The Inquirer was also criticized. I'm not saying that the media is 100% pure and infallible. We make mistakes, we commit mistakes, but we also admit our mistakes. There is accountability on our part. But for the bloggers, there's no such thing. There is no accountability. And what? You sue them, and who do you sue? There is no media organization. There's no organization that will represent them. But for journalists, there is a media organization that you can bring to court, and they will have lawyers who will contest what the allegations are. So anyway, that's the situation. I'm sure that there are always many sides to an issue, and I am not saying also that what I am saying is what I've presented is the sole truth.
Other questions? Yes. I'll acknowledge first the gentleman at the end, and then kayo po.
With due respect to the good judge, this is Dean Ray Alejandrino from Quezon Province. It is true that the streets now are safe. As a practitioner in the province, I am a witness to so many crimes, especially extrajudicial killings. And yet, simple burglary, house burglaries cannot be solved by the police. So with due respect to the good judge. And I'd like to thank the First Lady of the Dean. I have to research in the Google. She's very brave because she has a consultant for her husband. So as a journalist, Madam, what would you suggest for us lawyers, especially the Atenean lawyers here, the millennial lawyers, to do in order for the hatred and in the hearts and minds of the people? You know, the number one thing that is engulfing the nation now is the people are very afraid. They don't want to speak because, you know, the government has succeeded in doing these things against the people. So as a journalist, because many journalists are not doing their job now, so that the millennial lawyers here will act and prevent the killings in the provinces, like where I came from. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Ma'am?
I'm very sad to hear about Quezon, and I'm sure it's not just Quezon. I mean, you don't have to go far away from Metro Manila to hear the same things. As journalists and as reporters, we always wonder about where the lawyers are when we talk about the rule of law. When the rule of law is being, when they run roughshod over it, and it's being downgraded, there is no noise. There's not enough noise. And we actually draw courage from one another. In the same way, similarly for the media, when journalists were being attacked, we said, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with these attacks? And then they swarm you, and you've experienced this. You jump into the thread, you post your comment, or you try to debate and attempt a rational discussion. They just swarm you and attack you personally. So the effect really is, let's just keep quiet. I'll just stay in my safe space. And I think that's the same thing for lawyers. If you're seeing Constitution being violated, I don't see how you could keep quiet. In our case, so we were really shocked, no? But then we said we can't allow this to happen. We have to come together as journalists and as part of the media, and then, you know, try to counter this and say this is not acceptable. It is not acceptable to post untruths on social media and just let it pass. So maybe the good effect naman of that is that competitors ended up talking to each other and meeting and planning how do we address this. Maybe for lawyers, you need to do the same thing. You have to organize again This is like the 70s and the 80s all over again, isn't it? But that's how it is. It's like we're being pushed back in time. We're supposed to be moving forward. We're supposed to be progressing as a nation. But we're not in terms of civil liberties. And the lawyers really should be at the forefront of that. You just have to organize and speak up.
Okay, I have to acknowledge the gentleman. I apologize. This might be our last question, unless there is a burning question from the audience.
This is just to join with the conversations on the apparent clash of social media, constitutionalism, and populism. My observations coming from Mindanao, and you all know that we are still under martial law. But I think it's the context of, and I must say that, and it's just sad to note that Rappler has been a collateral damage of the apparent rise of extremism, terrorism, and security issues. To some extent that you see somehow, for example, in Mindanao, people trying to say that it's all right that our constitutional right is violated, which I think it's not right to say, for the higher interest of security. And I think that's somehow important for legal scholars, lawyers to discuss on how to balance the need also for, security, the need for a stronger law enforcement. Because there would always be a bipolar tension of a strong law enforcement vis-a-vis due process. Or I must say, the questions in the Philippines is not even actually an issue of due process, but a question of fairness, which I think apparently lacking in the conversation. So that's just my sense of, that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Last question, ma'am.
Good afternoon. This is for the all panelists. I just want to know your view on the comparison between Spain and the Philippines on the extent of the liability in terms of trial by publicity, which is based on a malicious or libelous transaction posted online, in relation to posting on social media, which is picked up by Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Because in payment processing, when you use payments online for Visa, MasterCard, China UnionPay, and you buy counterfeit transaction, for banking transaction, you can flag that illegal transaction by flagging it, depending on what it hit, $2,500 per day. So I'm a firm believer, if there is an economic sanction on an activity, then people will stop doing something malicious online. For Spain, I just want to find out, for a trial you discussed trial by newspaper that's posted online, which is based on a libelous statement, what is the extent of the liability imposable on the individual if it is posted online, considering that it is it has a cross-border implication?
I guess that's addressed to Professor Rodriguez.
Well, I will describe you how the situation is in Europe or in Spain. The point is that when people use social media, they tend to think that they are just chatting with friends and saying things that probably will not be liable under that circumstances. That the real point is that when you send a message through the social media, you can have an impact on hundreds of thousands of people. So that means that you are not chatting at your living room. You are using the public space. And that means that that implies responsibilities for what you are doing. I would add that the phenomenon of fake news. That is the idea that organizations are systematically and consciously using social media for disinformation certainly requires some kind of regulation, which is very hard to define because very sensible questions are there, freedom of speech to start with. But I think that you cannot ignore that the scenario has completely changed with the eruption of social media. So you cannot simply say, okay, this is freedom of speech, this is the free market of ideas, and so on. That will not be, in my view, an accurate description of how the situation is. This said, what kind of regulation is needed? Obviously, I don't know. But I think that we can take for safe that a kind of regulation is needed. Actually, at the European level, the European Parliament is now discussing how to deal with the problem of fake news in the social media. So probably in the near future, we will see some kind of regulation at the European level on that. It could be controversial, of course, but I think that you cannot simply do nothing on that. That's my reflection. Thank you.
Okay, and since we spoke about the word regulation, regulation dictates that I will end the session now, otherwise you'll get mad at me. So I will invite again Deans Candelaria and Toralvo to formally thank our speakers.
Again, it's been a long day, and perhaps it was a fitting end to this day that we had some very mind-steering issues, no, to ponder upon for tomorrow, look forward tomorrow. So we thank our presenters for today, and in a very humble way, we would present our tokens on behalf of the organizers also, Malaga and Ateneo. Please.
I agree, Professor Candelaria, and my thanks to all presenters for their presentations, and especially for our presenter now. I have learned a lot this afternoon, and I was afraid with the social media, but now I am convinced that after their presentations, that there is many people concerned by this problem, and with they, I know that I am less worried. Thank you.
Okay, so while we're completing our ceremony in front, a few reminders for tomorrow. We will see each other again tomorrow at 8 a.m. when registration starts. And kindly return your IDs to the Secretariat as you exit. And lastly, The most important reminder is we hope that you will have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow, and thank you very much for your attendance.